Bonjour, bonsoir, Ayubowan, and welcome to Rendez-Vous avec Yasmin
and Kumar. We are at the Martin Wickramasinghe Folk Museum in Koggala in the south of Sri Lanka.
Well, this is where Martin Wickramasinghe, the pioneering Sri Lankan writer, journalist and public thinker, was born.
Author, critic and thinker, widely acclaimed as the father of modern Sinhala literature, Martin Wickramasinghe wrote 13 novels, several short story collections and numerous collections of criticism.
While Wickramasinghe is appreciated and renowned for his fiction, his contributions to other fields remain largely unacknowledged. A pioneering polymath, he also introduced complex scientific, anthropological and cultural theories to Sri Lankans and made them more accessible to ordinary readers. Wickramasinghe's writings indicate that he was very much a synthesis of Eastern tradition and Western modernity.
And part of that synthesis derived from his wide reading of Western and European literature.
Among his influencers were the great French writers of his time and even before. The link between Wickramasinghe and France has never been examined as much as his other links with other cultures and societies. For instance, his masterpiece Viragya, which was translated into French in 1995 by Venerable Mandavala Panjavansathera. It was published by one of the largest French book publishers, L'Harmattan. French critics often noted the philosophical parallels between Wickramasinghe's anti-hero in Viragya, Aravinda, and the characters of Albert Camus like Marceau from L'Étranger. Wickramasinghe travelled to many countries towards the latter part of his life. In January 1968, he found himself in Paris along the river Seine.
The bookists, the iconic second-hand booksellers in green stores along the river Seine, remain then as now a visible aspect of Parisian life. As a passionate bibliophile and a self-taught intellectual, Wickramasinghe viewed the open-air bookshop of Paris as a symbol of the city's unique intellectual life, where rare philosophical texts and popular literature were available to anyone walking by the river.
Wickramasinghe described the Bouquiniste as an open-air university. He was struck by the sight of labourers in blue overalls standing alongside professors, both intently browsing the same green boxes. To him, this was the ultimate expression of a democratic culture where knowledge was not locked behind the iron gates of a university. This epitomized his connection not only with these bookstores, but rather with French art and culture and society, and of course, literature.
He walked by the bookstores of the river Seine. As he walked through them, he remembered the French writers he had read as a young man.
My intimate knowledge of the characters of the French men and women and their culture, gained from reading French novels from Hugo Balzac and Flaubert down to Camus, Sartre, Mauriac Leclésio, Armand Lenoux, and Jean Genet in English translations helped me to have a little unprejudiced insight into modern French life.
As he walked this time, once again, he reflected on these writers, and more importantly, what they had written about these bouquinists.
The name of the great French satirist after Voltaire, Anatole France, flashed in my mind. I dimly remembered one of his essays on these bookshops I had read when I was a young man of 30 years, and his reference to them in The Crime of Sylvestre Bonnard.
Even more significantly, he discerned and brought up the parallels he saw between the bouquinists of France and the itinerant second-hand bookstores of Sri Lanka. In these bookstores, Wickramasinghe discerned a love for reading and a passion for books, which brought together two very different worlds, France and Sri Lanka. Although Wickramasinghe's interest in European literature is well known, relatively little is known about the influence of French literature on his work. As his article makes clear, his trip to France brought back memories of the many French writers he had encountered in his youth.
In his essays and his memoirs, Upandas Sitter, 4 French writers crop up frequently. They seem to have had a profound influence on him. They were Anatole France, Guy de Maupassant, Victor Hugo, and Honoré de Balzac. They influenced Wickramasinghe's outlook tremendously. In Upandas Sitter, for example, he reflects on one of Maupassant's short stories, The Legion of Honor.
දේශපාලකයන් පිළිබඳ ඇනටෝල් ප්‍රාන්ස්ගේ හැඟීම් වෙනස් වූයේ මෝපසාන්ගේ How He Won the Legion of Honor කෙටි කතාව කියවීමෙනි ඔහුගේ චරිතය ලියුවේ කීය. මා එතෙක් කියවූ මෝපසාන්ගේ පොත්වල මේ කතාව නොවීය. මම මේ කතාව සහිත පොතක් ලබාගෙන කියවීමි. ඒ කතාව සිංහලයෙන් නගන්නට සිතූ නමුත් මට එය කළ නොහැකි වීය.
Fundamentally, the Legion of Honor is about one man's pathological greed for honor. In the protagonist's quest for titles, Wickramasinghe found a perfect blueprint for his own critical views of title hunters in British Ceylon. In his writings, Wickramasinghe vented out his feelings at the Mudaliars. These were the loyal and useful headmen who had been nurtured by successive colonial powers. Wickramasinghe's views on them come out quite well in his essays, but also his novels. These include the second of his trilogy on the social transformations of colonial Ceylon, Kali Yuga, or the Age of Kali.
When the Mudaliya and Mohandirams were summoned to the governor's mansion for a festival subsequently, my father refused to join the procession. One of his business friends argued with him.
If you don't go, the governor and the chief Mudaliya will fall out with you.
No, I don't think so.
What if they get angry and take our titles back?
And so, on the assigned day, father was amongst the other Mudaliyas who walked in the burning sun, dressed up in the Mudaliya's clothes, from the Colombo Fort railway station to the governor's mansion.
These parallels show what Wickramasinghe picked up from these writers, and more importantly, how he was able to use what they wrote to frame his critique of his own society. In his writings, Wickramasinghe refers frequently to satirical writers and prose stylists like Anatole France, Guy de Maupassant, and, of course, Voltaire. He read these writers in translation and reflected deeply on them. Their writings opened to him a totally different world in which all the foibles and weaknesses of humanity were laid bare. What is important to note is that while reading them, he opened himself up to a totally different way of looking at the world. This enabled him to transform and modernize his writing. And it led to one of the most prolific literary careers in colonial, post-colonial, and contemporary Sri Lanka. During World War II, Wickramasinghe was approached by a friend on behalf of a group of British officers. His friend told him that these officers badly wanted to read an erotic novel. Wickramasinghe listened.
ඔහු මෝපසන්ගේ සමහර සරාගී කතා කියවූවකි. මම ඔහුට ඇනටෝල් ෆ්‍රාන්ස්ගේ රැඩ්ලිලි නැමැති නවකතාව දුන්නෙමි. විවාහ වූ ස්ත්‍රියකගේ හා ඇගේ පාරයාගේ අනාචාර ජීවිතය විස්තර කරන්නේ කතාව. පළවුණු අවස්ථාවෙහි එක් විචාරකේ ඇනටෝල් ෆ්‍රාන්ස් වැනි තලතුණා වියහි වන බහුශ්‍රතයෙක් මෙවැනි කාමුක පොතක් ලිවීම නොමනා වැඩකි කීවේ.
In his later years, he moved on to more contemporary writers and philosophers. At this point, his writings are strewn with references to Jean-Paul Sartre and to Albert Camus, the twin peaks of French existential philosophy in the post-World War II period.
Wickramasinghe's interest in literature led him to probe into society, culture, art, politics, and anthropology.
His interest in culture was the result of his wider reading of other literatures.
Today, these aspects of culture come alive at the Martin Wickramasinghe Folk Museum.
For Wickramasinghe, art and culture was nothing less than a reflection of and window to the patterns of the society it sprang from. It is this society which is on display at the Martin Wickramasinghe Folk Culture Museum in Koggala. One of the largest in the country, it is also possibly the most comprehensive. From murals to masks, implements, weapons, utensils, and dresses, the museum showcases the patterns of life in a society that had been colonized for over 400 years. Martin Wickramasinghe passed away in 1976. He was 86 years old at the time. 5 years later, the Folk Museum was established. Today, the Martin Wickramasinghe Folk Museum serves a vital purpose in bringing together university academics, students, intellectuals, and lovers of Sri Lankan art and culture together.
Today, Mr. Martin Wickramasinghe serves as Secretary of the Martin Wickramasinghe Trust. Established in 1976, the Trust oversees the activities of the Folk Museum. Mr. Martin, in what ways do the items on display at the Folk Museum reflect Martin Wickramasinghe's own life and career?
Well, my grandfather firmly believed that our identity as a nation, as Sri Lankans, was to be found in our folk culture and in our rural communities. So as such, he had this mission or a dream really to establish a space where these artifacts and these technologies could be preserved. So I mean, if you look around you, all these artifacts really encompass the ways of life and the kind of society that he wrote about throughout his life.
Then as now, Martin Wickramasinghe remains the definitive writer of 20th century Sri Lanka. Part of who he was and what he wrote owes a debt to the writers and thinkers he read. Among them were the writers and thinkers of France. Ultimately, it is this which connected him and his world to the wider world of French literature.